Hi, I'm Jamie Wine. I'm the manager of the Blue Horizons Project, a program of Green Belt Alliance. And I'm here with my colleague Leigha, who manages the Green Belt Home Program.
Hi. I work a lot with builders and homeowners who want to build new homes or existing homes on making decisions about the HVAC system that is energy efficient and right for our climate.
So what do you need to think about when you're trying to choose HVAC, so heating, ventilation, and air conditioning for the uninitiated, when you're building a new home?
Sure. So there's a couple of big picture things to really think about first. I think the first one is actually fuel source. Because especially around here, for heating, there's several different choices. Natural gas, potentially, if you live with access to natural gas, or propane if you don't, or a heat pump, which those are becoming a lot more efficient. Those are all electric, which is a really important goal for reducing our climate impact. So I think looking at trying to find a way to use an electric heat pump for heating is a good way to go in this climate.
Really? I thought natural gas was cheap, and that's why people chose it.
If you live close enough to a natural gas line, it can be cheaper per unit of energy, but heat pumps are still more efficient, so they use less energy to begin with. Additionally, a heat pump is just an air conditioning system running in reverse.
Right, so it's like the same system.
It's exactly the same system. And most people around here are going to have air conditioning because we do have, pretty hot summers and we have pretty high levels of humidity. And air conditioning is one of the frontline ways that people control the humidity in their home as well.
Well, when you're thinking about building, if you have to build one system for HVAC versus with just the heat pump versus an air conditioner or a heat pump and a furnace and gas, all the infrastructure goes in there, so it could be more expensive.
Potentially. That kind of gets into a separate question, which is about how the heating or cooling is distributed throughout the house. That's another sort of big picture question to think about. And people have different, feelings about that. Some people, want to have potentially like radiant floor heat, or they think, no, I'm going to have forced air ductwork. And when you're looking at like a heat pump air conditioning combination, typically you're going to be looking at forced air ductwork because that's how air conditioning has to get distributed in this climate, unless you look into something like a ductless heat pump, which is actually just a really specific type of heat pump.
So I've seen these proposals from contractors. There's lots of terms on them: sear, ductless or ducted, gas furnaces, heat pumps. Do people bring those proposals to you in the chats? Do you answer those questions? What do all those terms mean?
So say you're in the market for a new HVAC system, whether it's for a new home or replacing the one in your own home, and you're trying to get quotes. There's a lot of technical terms that are out there in the industry around HVAC. So it's a good chance to kind of clear some of those up. When you're talking about a air conditioning system for cooling, often paired with a heat pump for heating, which is probably the most common and most energy efficient way to go in this climate, a couple of terms that matter. One would be SEER, or SEER, S-E-E-R, stands for Seasonal Energy Efficiency Ratio. That's just a measure of the cooling efficiency. And so the thing to know about there is the higher the better.
You want higher.
The higher the better. An example would be a 14 SEER system is kind of base efficiency.
Wow.
But something
We've come a long way, baby. It used
right.
to be like 7.
But something like 16 or even 18 and 20 are going to be upgrades that increase the efficiency of the system.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's just on the cooling side.
Okay.
The other thing to know, a lot of times if you're getting a totally new system, you're going to get an air conditioning system paired with a heat pump. That's going to provide basically the AC running in reverse in the winter.
It's like a valve that switches
pretty much
and brings the heat in instead of bringing the heat out.
And we talked before about how a heat pump is one of the most energy efficient ways to do heating in this climate because it's all electric. It's using pumps to kind of move heat rather than burning a fuel to generate heat.
Yeah.
So it's super efficient.
And we can get fossil fuels out of the home that way as we green the grid and get more solar and stuff.
Exactly. It's all electric.
More energy efficient, more environmental.
Yeah. Anyway, with heat pumps, they have a separate rating on the heating side, and it's called HSPF.
Oh.
And that stands for Heating Season Performance Factor.
Not some protection factor.
Right. And the interesting thing about that is, even though if you're buying a new heat pump, a lot of times they'll give you the SEER rating because sort of the industry sort of associates that with efficiency, and that is important for cooling. But the HSPF number, you may not actually get. It's good to ask for that number because that matters too. See, it's the same concept. The higher, the better.
Oh, okay.
An example of a good score would be like anything above 9.
Oh. It's lower than 16.
Right. It's that the scales are different, but the same idea applies.
Of course they're different.
Of course they're different.
Of course they're different.
That the higher the better.
Okay.
And so if you don't get that information, it's a good idea to just ask for what that is. I mean, they usually go up together. Like if one is higher, then the other one's probably going to be higher too, but maybe not always at the same rate. And what's interesting is heating actually costs more. You spend more energy on heating in this climate than you do on cooling.
Right.
So that having a higher HSPF is actually more important than having a higher SEER.
Oh,
Although
so
it's nice to have both.
Because it runs longer. It's running more because it's run during the cold season.
Right.
And our hot season is shorter. What about when I'm choosing, like, okay, do I have to put in ductwork and chases when I'm building something? Or what if I have an older home and I want to do a ductless system? Like, does that matter in the price or in the decision-making process with, like, the seasonal energy efficiency ratio?
So I guess thinking about how to distribute the heated and cooled air is different than the efficiency, and they both matter. And if you're working with an existing home, you may be constrained on what's available.
Right.
That certainly
Because
can
already
be
there.
right. And even in a new home, that really can be dependent upon the design. But certainly, I think a good thought process would be, is there a way to distribute heated and cooled air to the rooms that you want to have it in? Zoning is sort of the idea of dampers or things coming on to only send air to one section of your home at a time. And that also kind of gets specific to your home and what you're trying to do. Stage is another actually really important concept when you're comparing and shopping for a new heating and cooling system. So what that is the idea of a heating system that has multiple stages. Is kind of like a bicycle or a car that has multiple gears.
Mm-hmm.
And a typical standard older style AC or heat pump system would only have one stage. So
it's either on or off.
Basically on or off. So it's going to come on until it hits set point temperature, and then it's going to turn off.
So like with a car, it'd be like 0 or 60.
It'd be like a car with exactly. It'd be
But
like a car
there's
that's
nothing
like
in between.
0 or 60. There's a lot of newer advancements in heat pump technology now, and air conditioning as well. You might be able to see a 2-stage or multi-stage equipment where it's actually got more gears. The idea is it's more energy efficient to run in the gear that you need to run in to deliver the heating and cooling energy that you need right then, and maybe ramp up and down what speed you're in versus just turning on, using a lot of energy, then turning off again. And that actually makes the equipment last longer as well.
I don't know if this is a different video, but does geothermal play into this at all? Because that's also a heat pump, but it's earth source or ground source as opposed to air source.
Yeah.
Right.
So geothermal is a misnomer because the actual definition of geothermal would be like getting energy from lava vents, which isn't something that we have in Asheville.
Oh.
But
that's so disappointing. I was kind of hoping that the lava was part of this whole process.
Sure.
You got to go way deep down to get that heat.
But there definitely is a technology out there, it's been out there for a while, called geothermal heat pumps that really the actual correct term is ground source heat pumps, which it is really the same technology as a heat pump and air conditioning system that you commonly see. Those are actually air source heat pumps because they get the heating or cooled energy from the outside of the house. That's what that outside compressor is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's connected via refrigerant lines to an air handler on the inside.
And it's discharging heat into the air
Right.
or taking heat from
Right.
the air. And that's what the ground source thing does. It
So
either takes heat or gives heat back to the ground.
Yeah, the only difference is the heat source or sink is in the ground rather than the air, which is going to be a more stable temperature throughout the year. So
yeah, it's like in the 50s, right?
Right.
All the time.
Right, and so ground source heat pumps are much more efficient because
But they're much more expensive. You got to dig.
Right, they are much more efficient because of the heat source is the ground. They do tend to be more expensive because you do have more infrastructure costs and digging the wells to get the heat exchange fluid down into the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So I think ground source heat pumps can be a good choice. They are more efficient than even the most efficient air source heat pump. But because they're more expensive, it's sort of a trade-off about what makes the most sense, especially as air source heat pumps have actually caught up in efficiency as well.
Oh,
They're not quite as efficient as ground source just because of the physics, but they've made a lot of improvements because of things like variable stage operation.
So if anybody has extra questions about this, or they're confused, or they are building a house, or they are replacing a system in their existing home, can they call you? Or
Sure, you can go to our website if you're in Buncombe County and sign up to do a home energy chat. And talk for a little bit on Zoom about your specific home and what specific questions about improving its energy efficiency and reducing its climate impact that you might have.
So it's like custom for what's happening in your situation.
Sure, it's a chat about your house.
And then you'll send me an email afterwards so I don't forget everything, because there's a lot of terms.
Sure, we can send some follow-up info with lots of resources.
Thank goodness. Well, thanks for sitting down with us today and talking about HVAC systems as our resident expert. I know some stuff about this, but I feel like every time we talk I learn something new, so thank you.
Sure, thanks for having me.